Inappropriate questions don't unsettle you because of the words themselves. They unsettle you because they put you on the spot. They demand access. And most people panic because they believe they owe an answer. You don't. The first thing to understand is this: a question is not a command. Someone asking does not automatically earn a response. The moment you realize that, the pressure drops. You stop scrambling. You stop defending. You regain control. Defensiveness usually shows up when you feel cornered. When your body senses threat, it prepares to protect. Your voice tightens. Your words speed up. You explain more than necessary. And ironically, that gives the inappropriate question more power than it deserves. Calm is what disarms awkward intent, not clever comebacks, not aggression. Calm. When you respond calmly, you're signaling that the question didn't rattle you. And when someone realizes they can't provoke a reaction, their leverage disappears. You don't need to justify your boundaries. Explaining invites debate. Debate invites intrusion. A simple, steady response closes the door without slamming it. Short sentences. Neutral tone. No apology for protecting yourself. Many people think setting boundaries means being rude. It doesn't. Boundaries are about clarity, not confrontation. You can be polite and firm at the same time. In fact, that combination is what makes boundaries effective. Another powerful shift is replacing defensiveness with curiosity. Instead of reacting to the question, you can redirect it. A calm, "What makes you ask that?" puts the responsibility back where it belongs. Now the spotlight shifts. You're no longer the one being examined. Silence is also a response. When an inappropriate question hangs in the air unanswered, it often reveals itself. People become aware of what they just asked. The pause does the work for you. Tone matters more than content. You can say very little and still communicate a lot. A steady voice tells people you are comfortable with your limits. And comfort is convincing. It's important to remember that inappropriate questions often test boundaries. They're not always malicious, but they are revealing. How you respond teaches people what access they have to you. If you rush to explain, they learn they can push. If you stay calm and clear, they learn where the line is. You are not responsible for making others comfortable at the expense of your own. That belief is what traps people into oversharing and regret. Respect begins when you respect yourself first. Responding without defensiveness doesn't mean suppressing emotion. It means choosing not to let emotion drive the response. You acknowledge the moment without surrendering control. When you stop reacting and start responding, the dynamic shifts. You're no longer trying to escape discomfort. You're managing it. The most confident responses are often the simplest. No long stories. No emotional explanations. Just clarity. And here's the truth most people never learn. The more calmly you hold your boundaries, the less often they'll be tested. People sense strength before they hear words. You don't need to win the moment. You need to protect your peace. And when you respond inappropriate questions without defensiveness, you do exactly that quietly, steadily, and powerfully. Most people grow up believing that every question requires an answer. From an early age, we're taught that responding is polite, that silence is awkward, and that explaining ourselves is a sign of maturity. Over time, that belief becomes automatic. Someone asks, and we respond often without checking whether the question was appropriate, respectful, or even necessary. But not every question deserves an answer. And learning that changes how you experience conversations entirely. A question can be framed as curiosity, but it can also be a form of control. Some questions are designed to gather information, others to provoke emotion, test boundaries, or gain leverage. When you answer every question reflexively, you give away access without consent. You allow someone else to set the terms of the interaction. Choosing not to answer is not avoidance, it is discernment. The discomfort people feel when they don't answer a question comes from conditioning. Silence feels like failure because we've been taught that responsiveness equals respect. But respect is not measured by how much you reveal. It's measured by how well you protect what matters to you. You are not obligated to expose your thoughts, history, or personal life simply because someone asks. Answering inappropriate questions often leads to defensiveness. You explain too much, justify your choices, or rush to sound reasonable. In doing so, you hand over emotional control. The question dictates your state. But when you recognize that an answer is optional, you regain agency. You decide what enters the conversation and what does not. There is strength in restraint. Silence can communicate boundaries more clearly than words. When a question goes unanswered, it forces awareness. The other person becomes conscious of what they asked. Often, that awareness is enough to reset the interaction. Choosing not to answer does not require confrontation. You don't need to call out the question or criticize the person asking it. Calm non-engagement is often more effective. It keeps the interaction clean and prevents escalation. Many people fear that refusing to answer will make them seem rude or defensive. In reality, over-explaining often signals discomfort. A calm pause or a brief redirection signals confidence. It shows that you are comfortable with your limits. Not every question deserves an answer because not every question is asked with respect. Some are intrusive, some are manipulative, some are simply none of anyone else's business. Learning to distinguish between genuine curiosity and boundary testing is a critical skill. This doesn't mean you become closed or secretive. It means you become intentional. You choose when to share and when to withhold. That choice creates safety. When you stop answering every question, conversations change. You no longer feel trapped. You no longer rehearse responses in your head out of fear. You feel steadier because you know you're not required to participate in every exchange. There is also a deeper psychological benefit. Each time you choose not to answer an inappropriate question, you reinforce self-trust. You show yourself that your comfort matters. That trust reduces anxiety over time. People often test boundaries unconsciously. They ask personal questions to see how much access they have. Your response teaches them. If you answer everything, they learn they can keep going. If you pause or redirect, they adjust. You don't need clever comebacks or rehearsed lines. Simplicity is enough. A change of subject, a neutral response, or even silence communicates more than explanation ever could. It's also important to recognize that answering is not the same as connecting. True connection is mutual and respectful. It doesn't require extraction of personal information. You can be present and engaged without oversharing. When you stop feeling obligated to answer, conversations feel lighter. You're no longer managing other people's curiosity at your expense. You're participating by choice. This skill takes practice. The first few times you don't answer, it may feel uncomfortable. That discomfort is not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign you're breaking an old pattern. Over time, that discomfort fades. What replaces it is calm. You realize that nothing bad happens when you choose silence. The moment passes. The world moves on. Not every question deserves an answer because your boundaries deserve respect. When you stop responding automatically and start responding intentionally, you shift the balance of power back to where it belongs. You speak when it serves you. You stay silent when it doesn't. And that quiet choice is often the most confident response you can make. Awkward questions and inappropriate comments often succeed not because of their content, but because of the reaction they provoke. The moment tension rises, the person who asked gains control of the emotional direction of the interaction. Calm responses disrupt that pattern. They remove the payoff. When there is no visible reaction, awkward intent loses its power. Most awkward or intrusive questions are designed, consciously or unconsciously, to test boundaries. They introduce discomfort to see how you will respond. Defensiveness, anger, or embarrassment signals that the question landed. Calm signals the opposite. It communicates that the attempt to unsettle you didn't work. Calm is not passive. It is regulated strength. When your tone remains steady and your pace remains controlled, you signal self-possession. That steadiness shifts the dynamic. The person who expected a reaction is now faced with composure instead. People often believe they need to defend themselves to protect their dignity. In reality, dignity is preserved through restraint. Over-explaining, justifying, or emotionally reacting often reveals more vulnerability than the situation requires. Calm responses reveal nothing unnecessary. A calm response creates psychological distance. Instead of being pulled into the emotional frame of the question, you stay grounded in your own. That distance gives you choice. You decide whether to answer, redirect, or disengage. Tone matters more than content. You can say very little and still communicate authority. A simple, neutral response delivered calmly often ends the exchange. The absence of emotional charge removes momentum. Calm also invites self-awareness in others. When you don't react as expected, people often become aware of their own behavior. They sense the misstep. The awkwardness shifts back to its source. Remaining calm does not mean you approve or agree. It means you refuse to be provoked. You choose control over impulse. Calm responses also protect your nervous system. Reacting emotionally activates stress. Calm keeps your system regulated. That regulation preserves clarity and reduces lingering discomfort after the interaction. Another advantage of calm is that it prevents escalation. Defensive reactions often invite follow-up questions or challenges. Calm responses close the loop. There's nothing to push against. Calm communicates boundaries without confrontation. You don't need to announce limits loudly for them to be effective. A composed demeanor often communicates limits more clearly than words. People who remain calm in awkward moments are often perceived as confident, not because they dominate, but because they are not destabilized. That stability commands respect. Practicing calm responses requires awareness. The impulse to react is automatic. Calm is a choice made in the moment. It begins with slowing your breath, softening your posture, and speaking deliberately. Calm responses also allow time. Time to think, to choose, to decide how much access you want to give. That pause prevents regret. Over time, people learn what they can and cannot access with you. Calm consistency teaches boundaries without repeated explanation. It's important to understand that calm does not mean silence in every situation. It means controlled expression. You can be clear and calm at the same time. Calm also preserves your energy. Emotional reactions are costly. Calm is efficient. It allows you to move on without carrying the weight of the interaction. The ability to respond calmly in awkward situations is a skill. It improves with practice. Each time you choose calm, you reinforce your sense of control. Awkward intent relies on emotional disruption. Calm removes that disruption. Without reaction, the question loses its edge. When you remain calm, you don't just protect yourself. You set the tone for the entire interaction. Calm becomes the dominant energy. Over time, this changes how people engage with you. They approach with more respect. They test less. They adjust. Calm responses disarm awkward intent because they deny it fuel. They maintain dignity without explanation. They protect boundaries without conflict, and they allow you to stay grounded, present, and in control no matter what is asked. Many people believe that boundaries must be justified to be valid. They feel compelled to explain their reasons, offer background, or provide context so that others will understand and accept their limits. This belief turns boundaries into negotiation. But boundaries are not requests. They are statements of what you will and will not engage with. They do not require explanation to be legitimate. The urge to explain often comes from fear. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of appearing rude. Fear of disappointing others. So people soften their boundaries with long explanations, hoping to make them more acceptable. Ironically, this often weakens the boundary. The more you explain, the more room you create for debate, persuasion, and pushback. Explanation invites negotiation. When you give reasons, you hand someone material to argue with. They can question your logic, minimize your feelings, or suggest alternatives. What began as a clear limit becomes a conversation about whether that limit is reasonable. Boundaries lose their strength when they require approval. Setting a boundary without explanation is not cold or dismissive. It is clean. It communicates certainty. A simple, calm statement establishes where the line is without creating emotional friction. The clarity itself does the work. Many people mistake explanation for kindness. They believe that sparing feelings requires over-clarifying. But clarity is often kinder than over-accommodation. It prevents confusion. It prevents resentment. It sets expectations early. Boundaries also protect relationships. When limits are clear, people know how to interact with you. When boundaries are vague or constantly explained away, misunderstandings grow. Resentment builds quietly. There is also a psychological component. Each time you set a boundary without explaining, you reinforce self-trust. You show yourself that your comfort does not need external validation. That internal alignment reduces anxiety. People who push back against boundaries often do so because they were benefiting from the lack of them. Resistance does not mean the boundary is wrong. It means it is necessary. Explaining rarely satisfies someone who is invested in crossing the line. Silence can also be a boundary. You don't have to respond to every request or question. Non-engagement is a form of limit setting. It communicates where your energy is not available. Boundaries without explanation require calm delivery. Tone matters. A neutral, steady voice prevents escalation. It shows that the boundary is not emotional or reactive. It is simply a fact. Many people worry that refusing to explain will damage relationships. In reality, relationships that require you to abandon your boundaries to survive are already imbalanced. Healthy relationships adjust to limits. Boundaries also reduce internal conflict. When you stop explaining, you stop second-guessing. You don't replay conversations in your head, wondering if you justified yourself enough. A decision is complete. It's important to differentiate between explanation and communication. You can communicate your needs without defending them. Defense implies guilt. Boundaries do not require guilt. When you set boundaries without explanation, you also model healthy behavior. Others learn that they can do the same. It normalizes self-respect. Over time, consistent boundary setting reshapes how people interact with you. They ask differently. They assume less. They respect more. The discomfort you feel when you stop explaining is temporary. It comes from breaking old habits. That discomfort fades as your nervous system learns that you are safe, even when you don't justify yourself. Boundaries are not walls. They are guidelines. They allow connection without sacrifice. You don't owe anyone access to your time, energy, or personal information. Those are yours to manage. Explaining implies obligation. Boundaries assert choice. When you stop explaining, you reclaim authority over your decisions. You shift from seeking permission to setting terms. The most effective boundaries are simple, calm, and consistent. They don't argue. They don't convince. They simply exist. Setting boundaries without explanation is not about shutting people out. It's about letting yourself in. It's about honoring your limits without apology. And when you do that, your boundaries become stronger, clearer, and easier to maintain because they no longer depend on anyone else's understanding to stand. Defensiveness is a reflex. It shows up when we feel judged, misunderstood, or threatened. The body tightens, the voice sharpens, and the mind rushes to protect. In that state, the goal is not understanding but survival. Curiosity, on the other hand, creates space. It slows the moment. It shifts the interaction from opposition to exploration. When curiosity replaces defensiveness, conversations change direction. Defensiveness narrows attention. You focus on what was said and how it reflects on you. You prepare counterpoints. You brace for impact. Curiosity widens attention. It invites you to look beyond the surface of the words and ask what might be driving them. That shift reduces emotional intensity almost immediately. Most defensive reactions are rooted in assumptions. You assume intent. You assume judgment. You assume threat. Curiosity interrupts the chain. It replaces assumptions with questions, not interrogations, but genuine inquiries. Even a simple internal question, what's really happening here, can soften the response. Curiosity also changes tone. Defensiveness sounds sharp, rushed, or explanatory. Curiosity sounds calm, open, and measured. Tone influences outcome more than content. A curious response often disarms tension before it escalates. People often believe curiosity makes them vulnerable. They worry it gives the other person control. In reality, defensiveness hands over control by allowing the other person to dictate your emotional state. Curiosity keeps you grounded. You choose engagement instead of reaction. Curiosity doesn't mean you agree. It means you seek understanding before judgment. That distinction matters. Understanding gives you options. Defensiveness limits them. When you respond with curiosity, you slow the conversation. You buy time. Time allows regulation. Regulation allows clarity. Clarity allows choice. Curiosity also reveals information. Defensive reactions shut down dialogue. Curious responses invite explanation. Often, what initially felt like an attack turns out to be poorly worded concern, ignorance, or projection. Another strength of curiosity is that it shifts responsibility. Instead of carrying the burden of defense, you place the focus back on the other person's intent or perspective. You're no longer justifying yourself, you're exploring the interaction. Curiosity can also expose inappropriate behavior without confrontation. When someone asks an intrusive question, a curious response can highlight its awkwardness without accusation. The person becomes aware of what they've said. Internally, curiosity calms the nervous system. It signals safety. The body moves out of fight mode. Breathing slows. Muscles release. That physiological shift improves communication. Curiosity also preserves dignity. Defensiveness often leads to oversharing or regret. Curiosity keeps you measured. You don't reveal more than you intend. You stay aligned with your values. It's important to note that curiosity is not endless tolerance. It's a tool, not an obligation. You can be curious and still choose not to engage further. Curiosity opens the door. Boundaries decide how long you stay. Practicing curiosity takes awareness. The impulse to defend is automatic. Curiosity is a choice. It begins with pausing and redirecting attention from self-protection to understanding. Over time, choosing curiosity changes your conversational identity. People sense that you're not easily provoked. That perception reduces challenges and tests. Curiosity also makes you a better listener. You hear more. You respond more thoughtfully. Conversations become less about winning and more about navigating. Defensiveness creates distance. Curiosity creates connection. Even when connection isn't the goal, curiosity reduces friction. When you replace defensiveness with curiosity, you stop fighting imagined battles. You engage with reality instead of reaction. Curiosity keeps you flexible. It allows adjustment. Defensiveness locks you into position. You don't lose power by being curious. You gain perspective. And perspective is power. Curiosity beats defensiveness because it keeps you calm, clear, and in control. It transforms tension into information. It protects your energy while preserving dignity. And when you approach conversations with curiosity instead of armor, you create space for understanding or, when needed, for a clean and confident exit. Your tone speaks before your words do. Long before someone processes the content of what you're saying, they register how you're saying it. Tone carries emotional information. It signals confidence or uncertainty, openness or defensiveness, strength or hesitation. Whether you realize it or not, your tone is constantly teaching people how much access they have to you and how seriously they should take you. Most people focus on wording because words feel concrete. Tone feels subtle, almost invisible, but tone sets the frame. The same sentence delivered calmly can feel grounded and firm. While delivered with tension, it can feel defensive or unsure. People don't respond to language in isolation. They respond to energy. When your tone is rushed, apologetic, or overly accommodating, it sends a message even if your words are clear. It tells people you might be unsure of your position. It invites interruption, questioning, or pressure. Not because others are malicious, but because humans instinctively read cues. Tone is one of the strongest cues there is. A steady tone signals self-respect. It communicates that you are comfortable with what you're saying, even if the message is uncomfortable. Comfort is persuasive. When you sound settled, others are more likely to accept your boundaries without challenge. Tone also regulates the interaction. If you respond to inappropriate questions with agitation or sharpness, the conversation escalates. If you respond with calm firmness, the energy drops. You set the emotional temperature. Others adjust to it. Many people think they need to sound assertive by sounding aggressive. But aggression often reveals internal tension. True assertiveness is calm. It doesn't rush. It doesn't explain excessively. It doesn't ask for permission. It states and moves on. Your tone also teaches people what behavior gets rewarded. If someone crosses a line and you respond nervously or humorously to deflect, they may interpret that as tolerance. If you respond calmly and neutrally without emotional charge, the behavior often stops, not because you scolded, but because you didn't feed it. Tone is especially important when setting boundaries. Boundaries delivered with guilt invite negotiation. Boundaries delivered with calm confidence stand on their own. The words may be the same, but the tone changes everything. People often blame others for not respecting them without realizing the signals they send. This is not about fault. It's about awareness. Once you understand that tone teaches people how to treat you, you regain influence. Tone also affects how you feel about yourself. When you speak calmly and clearly, your nervous system learns that you can handle difficult moments. That builds internal trust. That trust reinforces calm tone the next time. It becomes a cycle of strength. Another overlooked aspect is consistency. A calm tone once won't change patterns, but consistent tone does. Over time, people adjust their expectations. They stop pushing. They stop testing. They learn where the line is. Your tone doesn't need to be cold or distant. Warmth and firmness can coexist. Calm does not mean disconnected. It means regulated. You can be kind without being compliant. Tone also protects your energy. Emotional reactions drain you. Calm tone conserves energy. It allows you to move on without carrying the interaction with you. Many people fear that a calm tone will make them seem weak. In reality, emotional volatility signals instability. Calm signals control. Control is power. Your tone also communicates self-worth. When you don't rush, apologize unnecessarily, or over-explain, you signal that your words are worth hearing. That signal is subtle, but people feel it. In the end, you don't need to convince people to respect you. You demonstrate it through how you speak. Every interaction is a lesson, whether intentional or not. Your tone teaches people how to treat you because it reveals how you treat yourself. When you speak with calm clarity, you show that you value your boundaries, your presence, and your peace. And once that lesson is consistently taught, most people don't need reminders, they adjust.